It's cold, let's get back inside. I hate when this happens. It is the worst. It's also on backwards. Things happen when you're sewing, and sometimes you get frustrated and you need to take a break. So, that was such a journey. So follow along and see how I made this dress from scratch, and see how you can make your own dress from scratch too. So it is super cold in Chicago, and I've been dreaming of having just a beautiful, cozy flannel dress. So I found a great plaid flannel fabric, and I sketched out a dress that I've been dreaming of. So today we're going to create it. And it's gonna be easier than you thought, because we are going to start with our sloper pattern. So you too can design anything that you're dreaming of. Even if you don't have a sloper pattern, I think this video is gonna be super interesting because I'm going to be sharing a part of my design process with you. And that's something I've really been wanting to do more of, so I'm really excited to share this with you. But if you don't have a sloper pattern and you want one, make sure you download the sloper pattern that I designed, and you can fit it perfectly to you through my series of videos. And you can check that out at sewinganastasia.com. Links for those videos will all be down below. Enough talking, let's start designing this dress. We are gonna turn this sloper dress here into my sketch. So what we're going to do is we're gonna give it a beautiful draped cowl out of that flannel. It's gonna be so cozy. We're gonna take this fitted skirt and we're gonna make it into a beautiful flared skirt. It's gonna look great with those plaid lines in the fabric. And then we are going to eliminate the darts in the bodice through a style line around the waist. So we're not gonna have any darts in this dress at all when we're finished with it. And you can totally use these techniques for the patterns that you have at home. So you can make a pencil skirt flowier. You can make a cowl top from any top pattern that you have. Once you start learning how to design, you can change up your patterns and create your own styles. The first thing I'm going to do is trace out my sloper pattern. So this dress right here is made up of these foundation blocks right here. So from this sloper dress, we can create anything. So that's why we are going to trace it out, and we're gonna manipulate it into the design that I've designed. So let's trace it out. Now grab your paper scissors, and we're gonna cut out the sloper set that we traced, and then we get to draw the style lines into it, chop it all apart, and make it into a new design. I'm all cut out. Let's get to work. So we have our back skirt, we have our back bodice, we have our front skirt, we have our front bodice, and we have our sleeve. So you never want to work from your original sloper set because you need those to always trace from. Those are like your little Bibles of sewing. So we want to work from our traced out copy because we are gonna cut this up and make it into a new style. The first thing we're gonna do is work on the skirt of the dress. So what we're going to do is give it some flow. We're gonna open this pattern up and give her some life. To open up this skirt, we're going to draw a line from the bottom of the dart to the hem. And we're gonna do this for both darts. Now what we're going to do is cut right down that line we just drew. Okay, now depending on how flared you want it, you can just close the dart and then you'll see that opens it up for flare. Or you can keep going from this point and open up a lot of flare. So I'm going to be giving this skirt a substantial amount of flare to it. So I'm going to place my pattern nice and straight there on the grid on the table, and then I'm going to swing this out. And I'm going to swing this out about 8 inches. So I'm gonna measure 8 inches, line up my pattern at the bottom with 8 inches. And now I'm going to tape it together at the top. So by doing this, I've eliminated the dart and I've created flare in my skirt here. And now we're also going to do this to the next dart. Essentially, what we're doing when we close the dart is we're transferring the excess in the dart to the bottom, but we don't have to just open it that amount. We can just keep going because what we need to keep in mind is that the waist has to be the same length in order to fit back into the bodice. So if you were to move the top piece, It would not fit back into the bodice unless you created a pleat there. But we're not gonna put any pleats at the waist, so I need these two pattern pieces to stay together just at the very top edge. You can apply this method to any skirt you have at home that has darts in the waist. You can close up those darts, add a little bit of flare, or add a lot of flare. You just need to keep in mind that the waist needs to fit into whatever you're sewing it into. Could be a bodice, it could be a waistband. Kind of think of it like a puzzle. You've got to make sure that those puzzle pieces are fitting back together. Now that we've slashed and spread our pattern open, it's time to retrace it. That's right, that technique is called slashing and spreading. It's kind of like a horror movie, but not really at all. Now we're going to trace out what we just created, and what we're doing is creating a whole new pattern piece. You could just tape some paper to these open areas here, but I'm gonna retrace out a whole new piece. You're probably wondering, what do I do with these open areas here where I don't have anything to trace at the bottom? Well, what we can do is connect them with a ruler, and then these little areas here do end up a little bit curved, so we'll also grab a curved ruler and just curve them out ever so slightly. So you'll see when I remove this, we have now got a new skirt. How cool is that? So we also want to label it, so it's a C.F center front and it's cut on fold. And that's how easy designing can be. I just made a whole new pattern piece just like that. And now I'm gonna do the exact same thing to the back skirt piece. So we're done manipulating both of our skirt pieces. And we went from this to our final piece. Now that you know how to do this, are you going to try it? Leave a comment down below. I'd love to know if you're going to try and make your skirt fuller, and how full are you going to go? Next, we're going to be working on the bodice of the dress, and I'm going to be talking about style lines. And style lines are where you have a seam where two pieces of fabric come together. You can also eliminate darts through style lines, which we're going to be doing. The first style line I'm going to be referencing is this arc shape here on the bodice. So we need to identify where we want this to be on the pattern. So I've decided I'd like my band to start about 5 inches up, and then it's going to come over to the side seam at about 2 inches. So it's going to create this arc shape on the front of the bodice. So now what we need to do is draw that on our paper pattern. So I've put a mark at center front for how high I want the arc to be, and then I've drawn my 2 inches over here at the side seam. What you want to do is get a curved ruler and draw this in real nice. I also usually like to just kind of roughly draw a sketch line to kind of see what I want it to look like. And if I like how it's looking, then I will grab a ruler. Now that we have the style line drawn in here, we are going to go ahead and cut it. Now we have our bodice in 2 separate pieces. We've got the band and we've got the top that we're going to turn into a cowl. But I do not want this dart here. So what we're going to do is close it up and get rid of it. So all you need to do is cut one of the dart legs. And because it runs into a style line, we can actually just close it up as if you were sewing it, but now it's in paper. We're gonna line up the bottom waist, and you're gonna notice when you do this, it does become uneven at the top. So what you need to do is true it, which means you're going to even it out. So what we're going to do is take our ruler again, and we're just going to get rid of that little spot that doesn't make any sense. So what we're going to do is cut it away. And now we have a beautiful curved shape that is matching our drawing for the front of our bodice. Isn't that cool? We have no more dart, but it's also creating shape for our bodice, but without the dart there. So now we've just got a beautiful piece of fabric that we'll be cutting out. But because we cut into the pattern, and this is a style line, and a style line is a seam, that means we need to add seam allowance to this. So we're gonna retrace it out and add 1/2 inch. Now that pattern piece is done because we have the 1/2 inch seam allowance on it. Now it's time to transform the top of the bodice. The first thing I'm going to do is drop the neckline. So I'm going to be using my French curve again, blending it into the shoulder, and we're just dropping it down a little so it's not going to be so tight and high up in our neck. So we can go ahead and just cut that off. We're just dropping the neckline. Get it out of there. Okay. No more sloper neckline. Now we've gotten rid of our neckline there, dropped it a little bit. Then what we want to do is take the excess from this dart here, and we're going to transfer it into the neckline since we're already making the neckline bigger with a cowl. So what we're going to do is draw a line from the tip of the dart into the neck. You guessed it, we are going to cut along this line and close up the dart at the bottom. So we are going to tape that dart shut. Excellent. And now too, hopefully you can see where this piece is going to end up fitting in. Now it is creating a bit of a severe point here, so we will add some paper and round that out just a little bit. So all we need to do is tape on some extra paper. Grab that French curve, which is super duper handy. And we are just going to round this out just a little bit. You can see it's not much, but it's enough that it's gonna make a difference when we're sewing it together. That's a key to pattern drafting, is making sure all your pieces are going to fit together. Because remember, it's like a giant puzzle and it has to go back together. Otherwise, you are gonna run into so many problems sewing. So as you're pattern drafting, step by step, you always wanna make sure everything is smooth and everything lines up. So if you have a side seam that's 7, the other side seam also has to be 7. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with big problems later on. So you can see how we closed that dart and we opened it up over to here, and it's really changed the shape of what it's looking like over here, right? So now what we wanna do is we're going to extend center front and the shoulder over, and we're basically going to create a cowl so that way we get some drapes and some extra fabric over here. And then this extra fabric here is not going to be sewn into a dart. We are going to leave it in the cowl. So we're going to get some fit and some drape on the top of the bodice. So now we're going to finish creating this pattern piece here. So we're going to transform what we have here into the cowl bodice. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a straight line for center front. So that way I have something to line up the center front of this pattern piece to. You always want to make sure you're weighting everything. And now let's go ahead and start tracing out the bottom, side seam, the armhole, and the shoulder. And now what we want to do from the tip of the shoulder is draw a line straight over to center front. This line here is going to be the extra fabric for the cowl. So if you could imagine, all of this extra paper in here is going to drape and turn into our cowl, because our true neckline is down here. So we are adding all of the extra fabric from here to here. So nothing crazy, nothing super huge, but enough to create some nice style. And now when we remove this, this is actually our new pattern piece for the front. But because this was a cut line originally for a style line, we need to go back here and add our 1/2 inch to the bottom. And then this pattern piece will be complete. This here is our seam allowance at a 1/2 inch. And now our center front too is on the bias. So we need to make sure when we're laying this pattern piece out that it is on the bias, so that way the neck drapes beautifully. Doesn't it look so different? Coolest part, we have no more dart on our new pattern. So I finished the front bodice and now it's time to work on the back bodice. So the back bodice isn't gonna have a cowl on it, but we're going to continue the style line from the side seam of the waist. You guys already know how to add a style line now, so I'm gonna go ahead and add my style line to the back. Check it out, the bodice is all pattern drafted. So we've got the front of our bodice top, front of our bodice bottom, we have the back of our bodice top, and the back of our bodice bottom. Now it's time to cut everything out of fabric and sew it up and see how it works. Hopefully nothing goes wrong, but you really never know until you dive into a project. So let's see how it goes. This is so exciting. We got it all cut out and it is so beautiful. I just want to wrap myself in this warm, cozy fabric. And you can see how I have all the plaid lines matching up. It's going to be beautiful. So while I've been pattern drafting all morning, I've also been building a nest. And if you've been pattern drafting, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been standing in this pink paper nest all morning long. Iris, what do you think of my nest? So now it is time to sew this dress together. But where do we start? And we don't have an instruction manual. So how do you sew something together that doesn't have an instruction manual? So there is a basic order of operations to sewing something together. First, you want to finish all of your edges. Whoosh, that was so much serging. I didn't realize there were so many pieces to serge in this dress that we just designed. And then if you have darts or you have spots that have gathering in it, you want to sew those together. So that way you can get your other pieces together. So for instance, I have style lines in my bodice. So putting my style lines together to create a full bodice is what I would do next. And then if we have a skirt that needs to be sewn to the bodice, we're gonna sew the skirts to the bodice, front and back. We ran out of bobbin. I hate when this happens. It is the worst. That's why you should always check and make sure you have enough bobbin thread when you're sewing, or if the sensor pops up and tells you you're low, you should pay attention to it. And I totally ignored it. And I went to iron it and I sewed it on backwards. Not only did I get half a seam, it's also on backwards. Things happen when you're sewing, and sometimes you get frustrated and you need to take a break. So I took a break and I am back today to finish this up with you. So don't get too stressed out when you make mistakes sewing. It is just part of learning and sewing. I make mistakes all the time and I've been sewing for 20 years. It's just part of the game. Are you guys excited to see it? I'll be finished so soon. I can't wait to try it on. Time to seam rip and get back to it. And then we can put in the zipper, wherever that might be, side seam, center back, etc. Maybe you have a button placket to put together. And then you can sew up your shoulders to front and back. And then you can put in the top of your sleeve. And then you can go ahead and sew up the underarm of your sleeve and the side of your dress at the same time. And lastly, you want your edge finishes. We are all hemmed. All the edges are hemmed, and now all I need to do is iron it and try it on. I am so excited to try this on. We did it. Here is the final dress. Can you believe we went from the sloper patterns to this dress? And we don't have to do any alterations or fittings because we already did that with our sloper patterns. So now when you design something, it fits you like a glove. So let's check out some of the details on this dress. I love this bias bodice with the cowl. It fits beautifully and there's no darts. That's the really cool part of it. Also in the waist, it fits great. You'll also notice no darts because we took in the shape through the style line that's here. And then we have our nice flared skirt. Also no darts, but we have some nice movement and it still fits great in the waist. And then in the back, we also have our beautiful bias back, our style lines in the waist, and we put in an invisible zipper in the back as well. And we also have our nice flared skirt. Isn't it so cool that you can go from your sloper patterns to a whole new dress that you designed and dreamed up and sketched? So today we went from sketch to a whole new dress with our sloper patterns. So cool. So hopefully you'll start manipulating your sloper patterns or other patterns that you already have, because it is not impossible to do and it's fairly easy if you know what to do, right? So that's why I was so excited to share with you today the process of coming up with a design, sketching it out, and then making it reality. It basically just like pops right out of the paper and now all of a sudden it's here and I'm wearing it. And a couple hours ago, it was a sketch. But what? Now it's here and I'm wearing it. It's such a cool process to go through and I just love designing clothes, and I hope that this has inspired you to also start designing clothes. Not everyone needs a degree in fashion design to be a designer. Thanks so much for watching Sewing Anastasia today. I hope you enjoyed designing a dress with me. If you have any questions or comments, leave it down below and I'll get back with you as soon as possible. And I would love to see your garments and creations that you're designing. So please share them with me or tag me at Sewing Anastasia so I can share them with everyone else and keep us all inspired and creative. And don't forget, I teach sewing classes in my design studio here in Chicago, Illinois. And if you're not in Chicago, you can also take them virtually. So check those out at sewinganastasia.com. And if you're not already a subscriber to Sewing Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when the new videos come out. I put out new videos every single week about fashion and sewing and designing. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.